Blog Talk Radio.
All right. Good morning, everybody. At least now that I'm in California, it's morning. It's morning today. So welcome to Yaron and Amy's show. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning, Yaron. And so
Not
we're
completely awake.
subjectivists now. Whatever time zone we're in that's what it is. Just good morning.
Time
and
zones are
everybody-
subjective. I mean, usually I do the show at 2 p.m. and now it's 11 a.m. and I haven't woken up yet. I'm jet lagged from all the travel.
From something.
From something.
Okay. Well, my excuse is going to be that I'm recovering from taking a standardized test this week. That's my excuse.
Oh, congratulations. You got your certification as a European privacy something.
Yeah, so the GDPR, which went into effect on May 25th of this year, affects not only European companies, but all sorts of companies in the United States as well. At least that's what they're trying to do with it. They're trying to say that anybody who markets to or monitors the behavior of European data subjects, and it's basically anybody who's in the EU,
Yep.
then they could be held subject to this law and made to be, paying administrative fines and all that kind of stuff. So it's the thing to do if I want to make myself useful to productive people who government is trying to
Good.
clamp down on.
You're going to be the defender of privacy against the European nuttiness.
Yeah. Now here's the thing, right? So if you look at the content of the law and what it tells them they should do in terms of their business practices, a lot of that makes sense. I think that a rational business person would want to preserve consumer privacy, have transparency, and all those sorts of things that the GDPR requires. The question is, are the hoops that the GDPR makes them jump through, the way that they make them keep records and things like that, is that exactly how you would have it done? These are government bureaucrats.
Yep.
They have their way that they think you should do it, and it's going to be kind of clunky, I think. Yeah. So
Good.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about today?
So did you like my little
Straws.
title?
Lots of
Yeah, we're
straw.
all kinds of stuff about straws. I mean,
I already talked about the ban on straws, but that ban is expanding because it was originally just Seattle.
right. And so now we've got it in Santa Barbara.
Oh, and Starbucks has banned them. Starbucks, well, it's a private company. They can do what they want.
They're choosing.
But luckily, I never buy any drinks at Starbucks with straws.
Do you know that I had just recently tried 2 different cold drinks that they have that they were serving with straws, and now I can't get them that way.
No, you can get them. You just get a paper straw
Or some stupid sippy cup thing.
biodegradable made out of I don't know. Let's not think about what it's made of. Biodegradable something straw that you could drink your Starbucks whatever from.
It used to be Frappuccino, and I had tried the Frappuccino, but with the sugar combined with the caffeine, it would just make me crash later. I could not drink those. But then they got this nitro cold brew coffee, which didn't necessarily have to be sweet.
No.
Well, liquid nitrogen makes it get cold really quick and stuff. You got cold foam with the iced coffee and yummy, right?
Okay.
And then they also have some teas which are pretty good as well. And I had tried.
Actually bought Tivana. I think Starbucks bought Tivana,
Right.
which was this really good tea company that sold all kinds of teas. So yeah, they probably have more teas now.
Yeah. So these were really good. And I mean, a straw is how you enjoy drinking
Well, you
these.
can still drink it with a straw. It's just a less efficient straw.
Yeah. Now, what they're doing, right, is they're doing it by, banning the distribution or sale of the straws. So, if you as a vendor distribute or sell the straws, that's the one that they're
You can go to
coming
jail.
down. Yeah, you
Which-
can actually
where is
go
this?
to jail for this.
Where is this? Who's doing
So this is Santa Barbara now. And I've got, this is the Newsweek article that I ended up putting in the program notes. The story that they're linking to is from Reason Magazine, and they've got the click through that you can do in the article. But the thing that's funny about this, and we'll talk about it in a second, but let's talk about the straw law first, right? So what it does is if you have, you're subject to this straw ban, if you are a restaurant or some other establishment, if you distribute or sell the straws, then you're going to be violating this law. At first it's administrative infraction, and then I guess if you disobey it a second time, you risk a maximum fine of $1,000 and 6 months in jail. So you would have to break this twice. But imagine this, going to jail for distributing plastic straws. That's what it is. And of course, it's not just plastic straws, it's also plastic cutlery. You can make plastic stirrers and cutlery available, but only on request.
So plastic cutlery is now banned.
If you automatically dispense it.
Okay. What about like Costco selling, big packets of plastic cutlery?
Well, that's obviously, I guess, a request if you go there and take it off the shelf or something, right? But I think they're talking about some sort of an establishment that would typically, you take your food to go and they would automatically include the plastic cutlery in the bag.
So let's talk about how this law protects individual rights.
Yeah. So what is the right that's involved here? I mean, what is it that I had heard, and you can tell me whether this is right, that it was about some picture. There was a turtle who got a straw stuck in his nose. That was one story I heard. And then the other thing that I heard was that
funny picture, turtle with a straw stuck in their nose. That's pretty funny.
Yeah. And I don't know what sort of suffering it caused the turtle or whatever. Yeah. But again, I've only heard these and I haven't gone and looked at them. I plead standardized test that kept me just so busy, that and the aftermath, because I'm thinking about what to do with my credential. But the other thing that I heard was that the straws can't be recycled.
What happens is, this is, I think, the reason they're using it is the straws can be recycled, but they fall in between like the cracks in the machines. So when they go through this what do you call it?
Conveyor belt or whatever. Yeah.
Conveyor belt, they fall on the ground. So there are all these pictures of straws lying in between. Somebody says, as Leonard Peikoff said, a picture is not an argument, but let's assume this is true, that a certain percentage of the straws don't go into the recycling thing. They fall in between.
So throw those ones away.
Or you could put them back on the conveyor belt, or you could throw them away and put them in the landfill. But we know that we're running out of landfills, and plastic doesn't what do you call it, decompose or whatever, because it's not biodegradable. Mm-hmm. So it's just we're leaving our great grandkids this legacy of plastic straws in the earth, and we're just going to be covered with plastic straws. The whole earth is.
Yeah, so there are all these myths.
There are all these myths about landfills, and it turns out that it's all mythology, because there's no shortage of landfills in America or anywhere in the world for that matter. The other issue is, I don't know if you've heard this one, but there's a whole crisis right now in recycling. I talked about this on a show a couple of months ago.
Yeah, I'd heard that a lot of stuff that you methodically separate because they tell you to, here's your different bins, and you put it all out there, that it doesn't even get recycled anyway.
No, so what used to happen until about 6 months ago is it all went on ships. And it was shipped to China, and China would buy all of our crap, and they would buy it for nothing, basically. I think we almost paid them just to take it off our hands, but they would buy it, and they would recycle it in China. It turns out, they would put it in landfills in China, right? Because China cares less about space, about digging deep holes and sticking stuff in the ground.
Right.
Anyway, it's too expensive for the Chinese to do this now. There are no benefits to recycling. Recycling is incredibly expensive, and it's incredibly wasteful. And the Chinese, because their economies have slowed over the last few months and is slowing still, have decided they don't want our crap anymore. They don't want our junk. They've stopped buying it. So all these cities that collect all this recyclable stuff are now frantically looking for a new place to send all our junk to. And supposedly some other countries like Vietnam and maybe other countries are accepting it right now. And they figure they can make a little bit of money on it. But there's this frantic search for places to recycle American straws and American plastic and American junk. And we know the alternative is, somebody mentioned this on, did you ever see Wall-E, the movie?
I did not.
This really cute little robot, and about man, who lives in a deserted planet Earth that is all one big landfill and full of junk, and it's uninhabitable because of all the junk. And human beings now,
maybe that's why I didn't see it,
are so rich and fat and lazy that they live on spaceships, but they can't walk anymore because they've lost the capacity to walk because they just sit in these lazy chairs, and they're so fat they can't get off the lazy chairs. And Wall-E, he's discovered, and he goes to these spaceships, and I can't remember the details, but it's incredibly cute because Wall-E is incredibly cute, this robot. But it's a horrible vision of mankind. But it's the vision of mankind that drives environmental regulation, that drives most of the regulations out there. So instead of digging a big hole in Nevada, and let me just tell you, those of you who haven't been to Nevada, Nevada's empty. There's just nobody there.
Wyoming,
like Vegas, and Reno. No, Wyoming's too pretty to dig up. But Nevada is both ugly and empty. There's just nobody there. And you could find a place like north of, maybe where they do, what do you call it, man? Burning Man. I mean, they don't care, those people. So you could just dig a huge hole, and you could put probably all the garbage that the U.S. consumes for the next 100 years.
Or at least all the straws.
Certainly all the straws.
Yes.
Because I don't think the Chinese, maybe the Chinese want the straws. They could probably recycle them and reuse them. So, don't let a straw go to waste. I don't know.
The other thing that I heard in connection with this, just about how ridiculous it is that with respect to Starbucks, the alternatives that they're giving, like there's some special cap, it's like a sippy cup cap or something they're going to give you. I have not been since Starbucks did this, so I haven't seen the horror yet, but it's something, because I just can't imagine drinking these drinks through anything other than a straw.
But they are straws. What they're doing is they're making straws from paper.
Oh, have you tried them?
No.
Okay. I'm going to have to go and try.
I'm sure they're reasonable. I'm sure they're reasonable straws. Starbucks wouldn't give you a straw that just fell apart in your mouth. And then, although, don't put them in a hot drink.
Well, yeah, but I wouldn't do that.
But then there are all these biodegradable straws now. Now, it's more expensive, so it raises. I mean, there's solutions. We could do without straws, right? It's just all the solutions expensive, and the whole thing is, shall I say, stupid, immoral, anti-human, degrading, but it's doable. We could, it's easy to replace straws. It's just much more expensive. The alternative is much more expensive. And the fact is that there's nothing wrong with straws. Straws are great. And the environment does not suffer from straws. There are plenty of places to put.
I mean, it's like somebody got sad because they saw the straws on the floor or the picture of the straw in the turtle's nose. And they decided that they should wield government force on everybody else to make them feel better. And, it's, as you said, one of the listeners had typed a comment about, a picture is not an argument. That I came up with that title, so I love to brag about that. But that talk that Leonard gave, he was making the point that the anti-abortion crowd will use these heart-wrenching pictures of a very young fetus that looks like a human being, that to, tug at your heartstrings and say, how in the world could you think it should be legal to abort this But
to me, this really shows that we're winning, right? I mean, in a sense, we're winning, or the environmentalists are not winning, because, I mean, really, straws, right? What they really want is to ban
6 months in jail. 6 months in jail for straws.
He's going to go to jail. But what they really want to do is ban all plastics, right? That's their agenda. The agenda is to ban plastics. But they know they can't do that. There's no way. So they get a couple of municipalities in Seattle and Santa Monica to ban.
Santa Barbara, to be.
Santa Barbara.
Yeah. They're next in Santa Monica, probably. Who knows?
All right. Next to, yeah, it's moving south. It'll hit this Orange County line and die right there on the Orange County line.
We hope, but I wouldn't speak too soon. We have the plastic bag, the bags.
Yeah, but plastic bags was California-wide. That was California-wide. So you could get a California-wide ban on straws. You could have it could be a, what do you call it? A thing where, see, I can't think anymore. What's the word for a ballot initiative? We could have a ballot in California to ban all straws. But look, what they really want is to ban all plastics, and they can't ban all plastics, right? Nobody will let them do that. We're not heading towards a plastic ban in the United States, or even in the crazy nutty state of California. So they're chipping away at the little margins where they can get away with it and show a turtle with a straw stuck in their nostril, or a few straws on the floor in a recycling plant. But the whole thing is it's just stupid. That's what it is. It's just stupid, and it shows that the environmentalists cannot get what they really want, and so they play at the margins, and the margins.
I actually doubt whether you could even get a ballot initiative going very strongly in California about the straws. I think it takes a very officious government bureaucrat who has no life to do something like that.
Or a nonprofit dedicated to this full time.
Right. I guess so. And then they, do something a little deceptive to get people to sign the thing, to get the thing on the ballot. So I think I've delivered in terms of the title. Again, the title is Straw Laws, right? Then we're going to have straw men and grasping at straws. So here's my attempt to deliver on the straw man part of the title. Okay. We all know a straw man argument, set up something that is just patently ridiculous.
Jonathan is trying to undercut my optimism, right? So he says they're getting it bit by bit, or straw by straw. They're getting it. Yeah. I mean, you're right. But I really don't see the Americans still won't give up on huge chunks of their life. They're not willing to just give up something that's essential to the standard of living and quality of life. So they chip away at the edges. They chip away a little bit here. They chip away a little bit there. Plastic bags.
Here's the question, right?
Even plastic bags where you can get. You just have to, like my wife, you know what Revital does? She buys plastic bags in Costco. She buys them in bulk, these massive boxes of plastic bags. And she goes to the grocery store with the plastic bags, and she has them fill her plastic bags.
So she gets it the old-fashioned way.
Yeah. So, and she's actually, we're getting it in large quantities, so it's really dirt cheap. And we've got masses of disposable plastic bags that we're filling landfills and recycling plants. Well, landfills, because we don't recycle with. Although I shouldn't say that in California, that might be a criminal offense. I might be going to jail for 6 months for not recycling. But yeah, and in Puerto Rico, certainly don't recycle. So, and in Puerto Rico also has the plastic bag ban. You have to pay for it. You have to ask for it.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But again, so you pay 10 cents and you got a plastic bag. I mean,
which I reuse once in a wastebasket. Yeah.
All right. So yes, they're getting it bit by bit. If you want to be a downer, if you want to be a pessimist, but it's also a sign that Americans are just not willing to give it all up all at once, and so there's still some fight, and we're buying time, and we can still fight these bastards.
Now here's the question about this, right? So you think about somebody realizing how unjust this is and wanting to fight it. The way that they've crafted the law, apparently, it's not, as I've been kind of talking out there, you go to jail for using a straw. It's not the individual user of the straw that's going to go to jail. It's the person who has the establishment who dispenses the straw.
And it's business, and we don't mind businessmen going to jail, right? We like
it. Right. There's that. So I hadn't even thought of that angle. Yeah. So that's a perfect angle. Yeah. The angle that I was thinking of is because there's a number of friends that I have on Twitter, and we could talk about, the overlap between this and other issues in a minute. But I have a number of friends out there in social media who have been putting up these really clever pictures of, come and take it in, I guess, Latin, right? So the pictures of them with straws and, drinking out of straws and everything. I was thinking about, Martin Luther King. I go back to the letters from Birmingham jail all the time. And he held that if there was an unjust law, that you actually had a moral duty to disobey the law. Of course, Rand disagrees. We've talked about this, that, you don't have a moral duty to disobey it. You should go ahead and obey it if you think you're more effective at fighting the injustice outside of jail, or you just want to live your life, or things like this. So the way that they craft this law, right, there's a number of people who I could imagine would be motivated to go stand in the middle of Santa Barbara and break this law, however many times it took to get thrown in jail, and make a huge test case out of it and do the social media thing and really just blast it and make a point about the injustice. However, notice that they're crafting the law to hit people, with this jail penalty, people who would be giving up a lot in order to do that. Why? Because they're the owners of these establishments, and probably they're supporting their families and they're providing work for all of these people and stuff. And they'll think, and I don't blame them, they'll think, oh, well, it's just plastic straws, it's no big deal. And they're not going to fight it. So that's where I think this is a particularly pernicious law, is that it is crafted in such a way that the people who it's going to actually affect directly are ones who won't want to put up a test case. I mean, maybe there's somebody, some heroic person in Santa Barbara who owns an establishment and who's willing to do this and stand on it, because it's a principle. This is a horrible principle that they're violating here. But, my prediction would be that the way that they've crafted it, nobody would want to give up what is required in order to fight this thing.
Yeah, I mean, Rachel says on Facebook that prohibition was the same. You don't go to jail, get fined for drinking. You go to jail, get fined for selling drinks.
Yes.
And even with drugs, most of the jail time, most of the is
for the dealers.
Selling. It's not for the consumers, right? We let people who smoke marijuana off, or we go after other dealers, and it's always that way. You want to go after the business people. You want to go after the people who've got the most to lose. You want to go after the people who are least sympathetic. And many of these laws, the prohibitions on business. All right, so you are moving us from to straw man.
Yeah, straw laws to straw man. So here's the straw man that ended up being created, and you can tell me whether you think it was on purpose or inadvertent. Newsweek, if people click through from the tweet that I have on the program notes, again, I've got the program notes at don'tletitgo.com. The original headline for this story said that you could have a 6-year jail term for breaking this law in Santa Barbara. 6 years.
Yeah.
And so, I post this out there, and actually I almost believe it, right? Because this is California and we're really wacky, and, it's Santa Barbara, and who knows what some wacky lawmaker in Santa Barbara managed to get passed. So, I put out there, and then someone says, it's not 6 years, it's 6 months. And that's what it is. It's, that's the jail term. It's 6 months. And of course, if you're arguing against a 6-year jail term, you could see that as sort of a straw man, that's really ridiculous. And then maybe if you're in the leftist mentality, you think that, well, in order for people to really take this seriously, you have to put some real penalty behind it. And so we have to have the $1,000 and the 6 months as a threat for the second infraction, et cetera, et cetera. Is it possible that Newsweek, in that original headline that they put out there and then later changed to something that didn't even reference the term, that they were on purpose putting the 6 years so that when you, the non-leftist, heard that, oh, it's only 6 months and $1,000, that somehow you'll think it's reasonable in a certain way?
No, I doubt it.
You don't think they're that conniving?
No.
No?
I don't think they're that conniving. No.
So you think that they believed it was 6 years, and 6 years it was an appropriate sound?
I think these people don't think. They just put stuff up and they run with it. So no, I don't think it's conniving.
Okay. That's
sure it's not.
Okay.
Too sophisticated.
Because there were a number of people who had that, kind of instinctive reaction of relief when they heard it was only 6 months in jail that you would get for dispensing.
I think it's malice. I think it's incompetence. I don't think it's malice. Spain says it's incompetence, not malice. I agree with him. I think it's complete incompetence.
Okay.
That's too, And
That was the effect on people, though. I mean, there were people,
Oh,
then
it's only 6 months. Yeah, but I don't think Newsweek can think that far. I don't think they care that much. And I don't think that this is a big enough issue to have a convoluted article in order to try to manipulate people. It's not an important, if it was a nationwide ban, maybe, but it's Santa Barbara. I don't know.
But Newsweek, they would be on board with the idea that they want to support California chipping away at our ability to get plastic bit by bit by bit.
No, it's too minor of an issue.
We accept it. We're the frog in the pot of boiling water, Yep. It's only 6 months.
Yep.
Oh, well, okay. So there was my straw man, but it was a very convolutedly created straw man inadvertently, you think. Okay, yes. So that's fine. So maybe I'm not delivering on my title. Let me look at one more angle on this story with you, if I may. And it's that there are a number of jokes going around the internet about this. They're talking about back alley deals and people, they're offering straws illegally. And so they'll talk about, I've got the bendy straws with stripes and everything else, right? And people are just laughing, and they're laughing about all the different ways that they could, as users, break the law and, have a black market and straws and everything else. And my question was, for the people who there's a number of people who are making those jokes about this law and at the same time will criticize those of us who are sympathetic with people who break the immigration law.
Yeah, no.
Where I'm going with that is the issue of the rule of law, right? So if you believe that the issue of the rule of law is really important and that you should never want to break a law because it's the law in any circumstance, you're not going to make jokes about breaking the plastic straw law, and how funny it is.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think very few people understand what the rule of law means. It doesn't mean you follow all the laws. It means that the laws are laws that are objective. The laws are laws that actually protect individual rights. And that's what the rule of law means. And by breaking laws that are anti-individual rights and and non-objective, you're not violating the idea of the rule of law. I speed. Does that mean I don't respect the rule of law? I'm sure I violate all kinds of other laws here and there because there's so many of them. I mean, somebody quoted the quote from Atlas Shrugged where they say the only way to rule innocent men is to create so many laws and make them so non-objective that you have to violate them. So in a world with non-objective laws and such bad laws, of course, we all violate laws all the time, and it's no big deal. And that's a lot of my case against immigration laws. They're so non-objective. They're so today arbitrary and limited and a violation of individual rights that I don't blame people for. And since there's no way to get here legally for 99% of the people who want to come here, I don't blame a certain percentage of them for trying to violate the law. I blame the lawmakers. I blame Congress. And everybody agrees, left, right, center, that our immigration laws are broken. Well, I mean, they are. They're non-objective. They're overly restrictive. They emphasize the wrong things. They're completely nutty. And instead of fixing them, they want to build a wall. Instead of fixing them, they want to separate families. Instead of fixing them, they want to abuse the people coming over, and they want to blame the people coming over. And I think the blame should be on Congress. Congress is defaulting on their responsibility to fix the immigration laws. They're defaulting on their responsibility to provide us with better immigration laws. Whatever you think the direction should be, whatever you think the laws should be, you need some kind of. It's Congress's fault. It's nobody else's fault.
Yeah, and I mean, there are certain laws that if you were to disobey them, even if you thought that they were unjust, maybe you would undermine the whole idea of the rule of law enough that you would say, okay, no, I do not want to do this, that, the rule of law is something that's more important. But clearly there's a lot of people, like I said, there's this overlap. There's a number of people who are willing to laugh all day about breaking the law with straws. And they would probably, if they're individuals, they would be the heroic people in Santa Barbara who'd sit there and go to jail for it to make the test case and everything else. But some of these people condemn immigrants who come here illegally. And that was really the observation that I had that doesn't actually fit into my title, but I thought it was something important there. It's nothing that supports my title. So maybe I failed on the straw man part of my title.
Yeah. But people are inconsistent about these things all the time. I mean, they criticize some laws. There is no principle guiding them. But you could say, they think, the people who are doing this think that the immigration laws are fine, or they think, if anything, the immigration laws should be tougher, and that it's not an issue. I don't know that everybody's saying, I mean, I hear a lot of conservatives say, well, they break the law, and that's wrong. And
yes.
Yeah, but they're not thinking, because none of them are thinking. Because
and that's really the one point that I would want to make if I could, and again, I don't know if any of the people who disagree with me on immigration are receptive. What your propensity, your willingness to joke about this straw law issue should at least tell you that the mere fact that I'm supportive of people who are breaking the immigration law, the ones who are just wanting to come here and seek a better life that don't mean any harm to anybody, et cetera. My sympathy for them does not mean that I don't believe in the rule of law any more than you joking about this straw ban doesn't mean that you don't believe in the rule of law. Yeah. That's really the point I wanted to make.
No, I think that's great.
Some people would say, oh, well, the immigration law is so much more serious, but
no, it's a misdemeanor, right? It's not even it's not a criminal offense to come here illegally.
It's not a criminal offense. You just get deportation. It's not necessarily jail time just for that even. Okay. So more severe penalties. I don't keep up on what the actual penalty is for just merely coming here illegally. Obviously, if you come here illegally and you commit a crime, you go to jail. Sometimes you face deportation, and that might be the right thing, of course, depending on the crime. Okay.
Greg makes a good point about your Newsweek thing. He says you can't attribute motives without evidence.
Yeah.
And I think he's right. I mean, it's arbitrary to assume that, unless you've seen a pattern at Newsweek where they've done this. And I don't see it, but I have seen a pattern in the media where they make errors, where they make. So I think we have to.
Yeah, and I think it is true.
Too much. Yeah. To people we disagree with.
No, in their own article, of course, it did say 6 months, but I understand. I'm not familiar with the process, but I've been told that at publications like Newsweek, New York Times, et cetera, that the people who write the headlines are not the people who write the articles.
That's right. So there are a lot of typos, and there are a lot of typos in newspapers.
Whoever it was maybe believed it could be 6 years, so that's kind of interesting. But
nobody was thinking in terms of, is this realistic?
6 years. Yeah. The reality check was not there. So I'm going to try to do a little bit better with the grasping at straws portion of my title. And this comes out of a tweet from Ted Cruz this morning. I don't know if I'm going to say Ted Cruz is grasping at straws, but I might say that somebody who is defending his position was in a second here. But listen to this from Ted Cruz, right? So I guess what happened is Alex Jones was banned from Facebook for 30 days, some temporary suspension of Alex Jones from Facebook for 30 days. I don't know exactly for what. I'm no fan of Alex Jones, and I know that he said some offensive and probably not true things.
Well, everything he says, most of what he says is not true. At best, the stuff he says is arbitrary. At worst, he's just a bold-faced liar, which is what he is most of the time.
So Cruz comes on and says, "I'm no fan of Jones. Among other things, he has a habit of repeatedly slandering my dad by falsely and absurdly accusing him of killing JFK. But who the hell made Facebook the arbiter of political speech? Free speech includes views you disagree with. Hashtag 1A, as in First Amendment, is somehow applicable to Facebook." This was Ted Cruz tweeting today.
But
Now
that,
he's
yeah,
said
we've seen that
similar.
on the right. We've seen that on the
We've
right.
seen it from him even before,
Yeah,
but
we've
out
seen
there
it from
just
him.
bold-faced on Twitter with the hashtag 1A, basically saying First Amendment applies to Facebook. The first thing you want to say to Ted Cruz, though, of course, is that Donald Trump, whom you happen to, I guess, like now, Ted Cruz, he was also spreading this slander about your dad and everything else. But I guess he forgets that Donald Trump did it. He'll just repeat that Alex Jones did it. But this is so disappointing from Cruz, I think, because Cruz, I thought, understood free speech. I actually put as a link in the program notes. Well, at least I tried to. I guess it didn't show
Well, but
up.
it just shows that Cruz is
There's a speech he gave.
Cruz is a politician like everybody else. Maybe at some point he understood free speech. Maybe he still understands free speech. I don't know. But he is quite willing to use populist sentiment to try to rile people up. And right now, Facebook is the enemy. And he, like many others on the so-called right, are willing to abandon whatever knowledge they had of the Constitution or whatever understanding they had of the Constitution in order to go after their current enemy, which is Facebook and Twitter and these others. So Facebook took such a hit yesterday. The day before yesterday. It lost, I don't know if you saw this, it lost almost 20% of its stock value.
Yes.
The largest dollar decline of any stock in US history. So they lost more value in one day in dollar terms than any stock in US history. Now, the dollar amount is not that important because what matters is percentage, and they didn't win on that one. But wow, so much wealth was wiped out in one day. $150 billion, I heard, something like that. I don't know if that's the actual number. But look, I mean, they were all going, what I think so many Republicans have found is that Donald Trump is successful, at least with Republicans. His approval rating among Republicans is higher than any Republican president. I mean, the Republicans just love him. 80%, I think, approval rating among Republicans, almost everything he does, including his press conference with Putin, was viewed positively by the Republican base. So what you're seeing is Cruz and most other Republicans who have ambitions about the future is shifting from being constitution. Cruz ran as a constitutional Republican, as somebody who believes in the Constitution and so on. I mean, I don't believe him because given his religious orientations, I don't believe he really understands the Constitution. But he ran as that. I think he's shifting away from that to become a populist, to become a nationalist. And to go after the enemy. And the enemy is the liberals in Silicon Valley. So go after the liberals in Silicon Valley. It's interesting. I don't know if I've told this story, but when Ted Cruz, I know somebody who was very high up in terms of contributing to Ted Cruz's campaign during the election. And at some point, as Trump was steamrolling Ted Cruz, I got a call from this guy, and he said, look, would you talk to Ted Cruz? And because, he needs some advice. He's losing to Donald Trump. Maybe you can steer in the right direction. And he needs to win California in the primary. And, would you talk to Ted Cruz and help him win California? And I said, look, at first I'd be happy to talk to Ted Cruz. I have no objection to talking to him. But I'm going to give him advice that he cannot live up to. He cannot do.
Yeah.
I said, if you want to win California, you can't run as an evangelical. If you want to win California, ultimately, you're going to have to appeal to kind of the Silicon Valley vote. You're going to have to be more.
And he wants to ban encryption.
Yeah. You have to. Well, he had the right opinion on Snowden originally. Remember, Snowden, he flipped. There's another one he flipped on.
Oh, no. I didn't know.
Originally, he had the right opinion on Snowden. And then during the debates, he flipped and he went after Snowden. I think he probably had the right opinion about encryption way back. And now that he is on the populist nationalist side, he's flipped. And this is why I don't think Ted Cruz or any of these people believe in anything. So I said I would give him the advice of ditching his evangelical roots and going and running as a secular Republican, as a secular Republican, pro-markets, pro-tech, pro-Silicon Valley Republican in California, and maybe that way winning. And of course, 2 days later, Ted Cruz withdrew from the race, so I never actually got to speak to him. But yeah, I mean, these people, this just proves that even somebody like Ted Cruz, who I think a lot of objectivists and a lot of others had hopes for, I never did. You remember we used to argue about this.
Yeah. I had some hopes for him.
Yeah.
I did. I admit. Two things.
But even they are power-lusting politicians, and whatever the winds shift, and they shift with the winds. And his attack on Facebook is a shifting of the winds.
Two things. So one is I see what happened when I tried to post the old video of Ted Cruz. So Ted Cruz was on the floor of the Senate and he talked for nearly an hour in defense of corporations using their money to speak. That part of free speech was the ability of corporations to use the resources they had to communicate ideas.
Was a Supreme Court case? That was a Supreme Court case.
No, this was when the Democrats were essentially trying to chip away at the First Amendment with some piece of legislation.
Yeah, but there was the famous.
So the Citizens United, right? So then the Dems were trying to
chip away at Citizens United legislation.
Yeah. So what happened when I tried to post it is that I ended up posting a link to all of my liked videos. So the first one is one of your shows, Yaron. So sorry. Okay. So that's why it didn't show up in the program notes. But if you look at my liked videos on YouTube, you'll see towards the very bottom of the list, this old video from Ted Cruz doing this. So, I mean, he understood, I swear he understood what it meant to use your own resources and spend your own money, and that even big corporations should be allowed to do this.
Well, you swear he could give a convincing speech about it. Whether he understood or not is a completely different question.
I couldn't imagine somebody be able to give that speech and not understand that. I mean, I guess maybe I'm naive.
Well, obviously he didn't, because he's completely reversed himself. Without, I mean, I don't think he'd admit to reversing himself, because I think he'd still say, yes, corporations should be able to use it, but that's political speech. But they bought into this idea that the platform makes them somehow fall under the First Amendment, that they're creating this neutral platform, and that's why they're being somehow protected.
Yeah, someone had said on Twitter, because they make it publicly available, that somehow it comes under the First Amendment. And so they're essentially buying into a faulty kind of branch of Supreme Court jurisprudence on this kind of stuff, right? The so-called shopping mall cases is where this started, I believe, way back some decades ago. So next, do you want an example, just for people who need education, about what a real threat to freedom of expression looks like? Or would you like my attempt to give you the example of grasping at straws? You pick.
Well, let's do a real example of what freedom of speech.
Okay. So
freedom of speech looks like.
Here's Washington Post, and headline is, venting about press, Trump has repeatedly sought to ban reporters over questions. He doesn't like the questions he's being asked by certain reporters, and he wants to ban them from these press conferences. He wants to ban them, says the story, from covering official events, or to revoke their press credentials, according to several current and former administration officials. That's what a real threat to freedom of expression looks like. I'd like to send that to Ted Cruz and anybody else who wants to know what the First Amendment actually is. I mean, do you agree on this? What should Trump's ability to ban reporters look like?
Right? This is the problem. There have to be criteria for who gets into these press conferences and who doesn't.
Yes.
Because they can't allow everybody in, and anybody could be claim, and you'd have thousands of people there from every minor publication. So there has to be some objective criteria for letting people in. And I think the argument Trump would make, and the argument people would make, is CNN is not an objective news source. CNN is not real reporting, and therefore they shouldn't be allowed in. New York Times is a leftist propaganda tool, and therefore they should be banned from reporting. So I think that's objectively untrue. I know some of the people out there are going to think I'm crazy. These are, though biased, very biased, they are as legitimate as Fox, which is biased in the other direction, or any other news source out there. They have huge readership, and they actually have reporters. So they don't just do editorials, they actually have reporters. They are large news organizations that have reporters, and therefore objectively should be allowed in and to ask questions. And the criteria can never be, I don't like the question. Now, he could
because that's content-based discrimination in effect.
He could make the argument the New York Times has become like the National Enquirer. We don't allow the National Enquirer into these meetings. We shouldn't allow the New York Times. But then he'd have to make the case that the New York Times is equal to the National Enquirer. You can't just say, I don't like your questions. So yes, politicians do not have a right to say, I don't like your questions. They can say, I'm not going to answer that question and suffer the consequences that are associated with not answer the questions in the public eye. But the idea that there are questions that, or there are attitudes that, oh no, that our politicians have too thin of a skin to handle is just pathetic and ridiculous. And yes, I mean, Donald Trump is a massive attacker on freedom of expression, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. I mean, his whole going after Amazon because he hates the Washington Post. He said it. It's not me attributing this to him.
Sure.
He said it, right? That to me is the worst of all of them. And look, to be fair, so was Obama. Obama used to have all kinds of restrictions and go after the press, and he went after Fox and try to, again, discriminate against Fox. So both of them, I think the general trend today is against free speech. I think but Trump has taken it to a new level. He's much worse than any president, at least in my memory. It could be that 100 years ago there were, could be that FDR was worse in some respects. I don't know, but certainly in modern times he is the worst. And he is explicitly, I don't think he believes in free speech. I don't think he believes in freedom of the press. Again, I've always thought that he is an admirer of authoritarians and that his real instincts are authoritarian. And you can see that as an admiration and positive attitude towards Putin. He thinks he admires Putin's and wishes he could be the same. And think about what Putin has done. Putin kills journalists. There's no free speech and no free press in Russia. If you run a news organization that's critical of Putin, you will not survive. And there's a good chance you will end up in jail and some potential that you will actually be killed. So there's actually, and there's no exceptions here. Somebody says the fake attacks against Trump were exceptional. Fine, maybe they are exceptional. That still does not give the government, should give the government the ability under our Constitution to silence the press. He is a public figure. He is the president of the United States. Suck it up.
Yeah, I mean, his whole thing of just going out there on Twitter and criticizing the press, I have had qualms with. I think that there is a certain extent to which it would be appropriate for a president to criticize a particular story written about him, for example, and say, okay, it's not true, and I'm going to defend myself and everything else. But when he calls for a certain person at a certain news outlet to be fired, for example, which he's done on Twitter before, or he has the so-called fake news awards, and he's going to tell you, which is this is a criticism of the press that I think crosses the line.
Oh, it crosses the line.
Has the chilling effect on people. Not to mention, that football players shouldn't take a knee and all this kind of stuff. There are a number of things that he does that I think are inimical to any kind of idea of free speech. And since he's the president and he's acting under a lot of times color of law, at least if, and he's implicitly threatening to do something about some of these things, it has a chilling effect.
But it's important. It's not the business of government to tell us what the truth is. It's very, very dangerous when the government starts saying, this is fake news, this is the truth on issues that are not directly related to them, right? So yes, Donald Trump, if somebody writes a story that's wrong about him, that he should say that is wrong.
Right.
If the government does X and the reporting is Y, then it's appropriate for the government to say, no, we did X. We did what you're saying as well. But to brand certain news media fake news, to defend other news media, and to position yourself as the arbitrator of truth, and to condemn the media for all being purveyors of fake news is clearly, in my view, a violation of the First Amendment, clearly a violation of the role of government. And he should just stay out of it. If you're on the sideline, if you want to say the New York Times is garbage and the New York Times is fake news and the New York Times distorts, great. But
well, and so that leads to the argument that some people make, Yaron, which is that Trump shouldn't lose his own right to freedom of expression just because he's president and he's expressing his opinion, and this is just his personal Twitter account.
No, you lose a lot of what you can and cannot do once you become president of the United States. Once you become a politician, generally, you are wielding a gun now. You are wielding a sword. You are an agent of force, and your responsibilities now change. Just like what a CEO can say to employees is not exactly the same as what employees can say. You have different responsibilities. You can't just go out and, I don't know.
When I worked at the Air Force Academy, there were certain rules about what I could or couldn't publish. Yeah.
I can't think of an example right now, but it's obvious to me that in different, but legally, when you're, that's more conventionally in terms of fiduciary responsibility, but legally, when you're the president of the United States, everything you say is now potentially has implications with regard to force. It has implications.
Everything you say publicly, at least.
Everything you say publicly has implications with regard to using force against citizens. It has to do with particularly today, right? Maybe 150 years ago, it's not true because government was so limited and its scope was so narrow that you could talk about a lot of other things, but you were never presumed to have influence over those other things. But today, when the government is to a large extent unlimited and its scope is everywhere and everything, then I
mean, the only
Noah, who I guess is one of these people, unfortunately, I mean, I hope I'm not insulting you, Noah, but it seems like who will justify anything Donald Trump does, says Trump likes free speech. He proves it good with irony. No, Trump hates free speech. And you could tell by how angry he gets when he's being criticized and how angry he gets at Jeff Bezos and how angry he gets at Amazon. That's not irony. That is emotionalism. That's anger. And that is clearly, it's clearly threatening because of the power the president of the United States wields today versus the power the president of the United States yielded 150 years ago. He has so much power today that anything he says with regard to these kind of, when he says, I don't like CNN, and then the Justice Department goes and blocks a deal between AT&T and Time Warner, who happens to own CNN, all of that is, is an issue of violation. You can see how what he says can be implemented in the random power that he has over business and over our lives. And therefore, a president today should have much more restrictions about what he can say and what he can't say, what he should say and what he shouldn't say. And Trump has none of that, no semblance of that. And I'm not saying, again, every president has been bad on this.
Yes.
Trump is just much, much worse than them. And I know those of you who are crazy Trump supporters think I'm being biased and emotional. I am being emotional. And I haven't hid the fact that
freedom of expression is the last straw. Someone asked on Twitter earlier, it's like, what is the last straw? The last straw is freedom of expression. And this is why we would get very animated about this. Yeah.
I'm animated. I'm passionate about this stuff. Am I being an emotionalist? No, because everything I'm saying, I'm justifying with facts. I'm justifying with arguments. And, you can say I sound biased because I'm passionate, but passion does not indicate bias. You find bias in what I've actually said. What have I said? What are the facts that I presented? What is the argument that I've made that is biased? I'm open to the fact that I might be biased, but I want some evidence to suggest that rather than the tone of my voice suggesting.
No, I mean, and this is the thing, right? So when government has as much power as it does today, again, when you see a city is going to put somebody in jail for 6 months for, distributing straws or something like that, when government is wielding so much power, and you've got a president out there on Twitter criticizing, and he also implies or even sometimes explicitly mentions certain things. So, for example, one tweet I saw, and I've shared it and everything, but it's been a while. I can't go find it now. He talks about this stuff so many times. He actually talked about revoking licenses of certain media outlets. He mentioned that explicitly on Twitter. So if that is not a threat, I don't know what is.
Now, somebody says he hasn't done anything. There's been no legislation, so therefore it's not a violation.
So what about, Pfizer, for example, right? He tweets out there about, drug companies, and they're taking advantage of sick people or whatever it was. It was, something to the effect that drug companies aren't doing their altruistic duty because they charge too much. And then Pfizer holds back on a price increase that they were going to impose because of what he does. They would not do that if they didn't think there was an implicit threat going on. There are implicit threats in those tweets. Trump has the power, and people are finding themselves at the mercy. Now, mind you, the power that Trump has to do stuff about this, he was bequeathed, but from all the presidents before him. So it was all the presidents before him, or all the full governments, legislatures and Supreme Court justices and everything else, all of them ended up giving Trump this kind of power. But Trump has that power. And if you think there is not an implicit threat in Trump tweeting out criticisms of people and then every so often implying what could be done about it, of course there is.
Yeah, but look, a threat is a violation of rights. You don't have a right as a private citizen to threaten if it's a legitimate threat that you could do something about.
Exactly.
The president of the United States has no right to threaten businesses.
Yeah.
They don't have a right to threaten businesses. So
not when they're doing legal things.
No, not when they're doing legal things, and not when they could implement the threats. Even though he hasn't implemented any threats, his threats are causing people to change their behavior in ways that are violations. He is violating our freedoms. Now,
it has a chilling effect. It has a chilling effect. We could go back, right? I was a strong opponent and critic of Obama. He had this Attack Watch site that was affiliated with him a little bit indirectly, but basically some people who were helping Obama get reelected, I guess, put this site up, Attack Watch, and everybody's supposed to report people that they saw who were spreading untruths about Obama or something. And all these people on the right who are now defending Trump when he's out there tweeting this stuff, right? The critics of the fake news and everything else. A lot of these people were joining in a very spirited way to make fun of Obama's Attack Watch. I've got a blog post on it on my blog, Attack Watch. But what I talk about in there is that, even though it's, this tiny little thing, it's that you're going to be singled out on a website of Obama's for being a critic of him. And maybe you were an unfair critic, or you said something that wasn't true about Obama. The fact that Obama's taking note of it and he's putting it on this site that's affiliated with him and everything else, it has the tiniest bit of an implicit threat behind it, because Obama had that power too to do things to you. And I don't know why, a lot of these people who are on the right, they were right there criticizing it then. But now when Trump is doing so much more than Attack Watch, one website, that was so innocent by comparison. And yet people are saying, well, he doesn't act on it, not directly anyway, in a way that they can't easily evade, I guess.
So here's somebody who wants to disagree with me, but he's put 20 pounds, it looks like English pounds, that's a lot of money on it. So he says, Yaron doesn't seem to understand hyperbole. Trump is just
hyperbole.
Hyperbole, sorry, hyperbole.
Okay.
I can't even pronounce hyperbole, never mind understand hyperbole, because I obviously don't. He doesn't get Trump and needs to listen to Scott Adams. I've listened to Scott Adams. I think Scott Adams is wrong. Stop losing your mind over what is hyperbole.
Hyperbole.
See?
It's okay.
Right? I am from the UK, and saying we are all idiots is ridiculous. I don't think you're all idiots. I think you're all, you're not, you have, there's something about Trump that incredibly appeals to you. And I can understand that. Partially, he is so anti-establishment. Like I think Michael said here on YouTube, He said he's anti the intelligentsia, and the intelligentsia is so corrupt and so on. That's appealing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're taking certain aspects that are appealing about Trump, and then you're extrapolating from that he cannot do anything wrong, that everything he says you will find a distorted way in order to justify. But there is no way to justify what he says. What he says is much of what he says is horrific. It's stupid. It's moronic. Much of what he does is moronic. It's anti-American. I will say he's the second most anti-American president in American history after Obama.
Mm.
I can't think of anybody who would another president who would do what he did with Putin, or who would do what he did with the monster of North Korea. And yet you will justify it as some grand fourth dimensional strategy or hyperbole, or he's just talking, he's not serious. What was it? Irony. I mean, it strikes me as so amazing.
Grasping at straws.
Yeah, grasping at straws. There you go. Good one, Amy. It strikes me as so amazing that there are people out there who I don't think are idiotic. I don't think this is an issue of being an idiot, who will find a way to justify anything this man does when there is no justification for what he does, other than he is just a bad human being. And
I mean, here's the thing, right?
And I want to get to talking about the good economy, because I know you guys, and somebody said we're freer today. I don't think we're freer today. I think in some respects I'm less free today. I'm scared of my government more today than I was even under Obama, because I think this president is quite willing to use government to abuse my rights more even than Obama was willing. But I don't feel freer today. But in terms of the economy, we'll talk about that. I think it's on Amy's agenda to talk.
Right. And my question for you was going to be about that economy story was, do I get to put this as an example of grasping at straws, right? Because Trump has just come under fire in the last week or so because it was necessary to introduce another layer of force into our economy, namely giving subsidies to farmers because of the bad effects of the tariffs that he's imposing, which is a layer of force that he added in.
Yeah.
And so he's been coming under fire. Why? Because the policies that he has tried to introduce are having a bad effect on the economy. And so then suddenly these numbers come in, and who knows, these numbers are going to be adjusted. You can tell me about the validity of these GDP numbers anyway.
Yep.
But he's going to take credit for this good economy. And it's like, is he in effect grasping at straws because he's doing things to make this economy worse?
Yeah. So let me get to that. The economy it's a good story, and it's got some complexity to it. So, but Java put another 2 pounds in. What does he say is anti-American? I'll give you a number of examples what he said as anti-Americans. When told that Putin kills journalists, and does that change his mind about Putin? What Donald Trump says, we all kill people. America kills people as well, thus creating a moral equivalency between the United States and Russia under Putin. I don't believe there is such a thing as such a moral equivalency.
He acts in anti-American ways, right? So I would say that an American, a true American that believes in the philosophy of individualism, is not going to go and meet with thuggish dictators.
That's right.
And give moral sanction and praise in any way a thuggish dictator. Maybe you could see that in the back channels there's going to be some sort of a pragmatic deal made. Yep. That is something that you'd say, okay, but that to have that spectacle of an American president praising a thuggish dictator is, to me, very anti-American in symbolism, more so than a stupid football player taking a knee, which he spends his whole time criticizing.
Yes, and it's the whole moral equivalency. He's on many times said there's nothing special about America. There's no American exceptionalism. He does not talk about the Constitution or the individualism that's uniquely American or anything that's uniquely American. His patriotism is shallow and empty. it is a patriotism of flag and anthem, not a patriotism of ideas.
Mm-hmm.
And again, Trump killed more Russians than how many of our last. Trump killed Russians by accident. The Russians attacked, and it wasn't Trump. Trump didn't order them killed. Trump was not involved. The fact is, and Mathis didn't do that. The fact is that a band of Russians attacked the U.S. base and they were wiped out. And it's the soldiers on the ground that killed them. It's the soldiers on the ground that get all the credit. It has nothing to do with Trump. And they didn't even know they were Russians until after they killed them all. So the idea that somehow Trump has been killing Russians, Trump and his missiles when he's lobbed bombs into Syria has made it very evident that he does not want to kill Russians, that he will not be killing Russians, that not that I think he should be killing Russians. But,
well, and again, so this goes to the argument of, well, right, but also the argument there where he's talking about, oh, well, so we've killed Russians. I think, is that supposed to be making the argument that, well, sure, when he's out there on TV at the press conference, he's praising Putin, but behind the scenes, actions speak louder than words, and we've been killing Russians. What people say and do in a symbolic way matters tremendously. And there's a number of people that have been supporting Trump and saying, okay, well, yeah, sure, he meets with, Kim Jong-un, but who knows what he's doing behind the scenes. He meets and he praises, as if the meeting and the praising doesn't itself mean something. We are conceptual beings. We are human beings. We are conceptual beings. And, it's ironic. I used to make this argument with respect to Ted Cruz, right? Mm. When Ted Cruz was so good on the floor of the Senate arguing against Obamacare, I talked about the spiritual fuel value of sometimes seeing a politician who actually stood up for the right thing, because, we're fighting for the future. We don't have any idea of a politician that is a politician that we'd hope to see in the future. Wouldn't it be nice to see one today doing something? It means something. Similarly, if Trump is our president and he's out there meeting and praising, these dictators.
Disgusting. It's absolutely disgusting.
It is demoralizing to people who actually care about values.
Absolutely. And look, what's he doing in the background? Well, when Pompeo went over there, what happened? The North Koreans accused him of all kinds of things. And Pompeo said, oh, no, it was a great meeting. And the North Koreans said, the whole thing is so, Kim is not destroying his test sites. He's destroying the sites that were already destroyed. He's dismantling stuff that he's already going to dismantle. Just wait and see if Kim dismantles his nuclear program. I mean, you guys are so, if Obama had met with Kim and got the same deal from Kim, you guys will be all over him. Again, it's this bias, unbelievable bias that you have. You cannot accept anything that Donald Trump does as being flawed, even little things. I can accept some stuff that Donald Trump does that are good. Sure. I think it's the large extent by accident, but I can say that it's good. You can't say anything negative about him, which is shocking. And you should start thinking about what is actually going on. Now, here's JavaScript again. I'm sorry, Yaron, but Obama killed loads through drone strikes, including terrorists. Good. There were American citizens. Questionable. You're being a hypocrite. No, I didn't condemn what's his name? Trump for killing Russians. I don't have any problems with Americans defending themselves. I wonder why American troops are in Syria. What's their purpose there? What are they doing there? Why are they there? And by the way, I condemned Obama on a million different things. So I'm not being a hypocrite here. I condemned Obama. I'm condemning Trump. I didn't condemn Obama for killing terrorists, because I'm all for killing terrorists using drones. And I don't condemn Trump for continuing that program to the extent that it's being continued. But anyway, given that he put some money to it, here's another one. What's your reaction to Trump's NATO agreement? I've said about NATO a number of times, I don't believe the United States should be in NATO. So I'm actually more negative on NATO than Trump claims to be. I agree. This is one thing I agree with Trump completely. If we are in NATO, European countries should pay a lot more, much more than even I think Trump suggests, to fund NATO. I think the whole Europe is not paying enough for its own defense is absolutely right. This is the thing about Trump. Once in a while, he says true things, and people get excited about that. But instead of saying, okay, he said something true here, but he's full of crap everywhere else, the too many people's attitude is, now I have to go and rationalize all the crap that he says and make it sound true because I like what he said over here. Right. So I think the U.S. should leave NATO, let the Europeans defend themselves. I see no threat to the United States that justifies the existence of NATO. NATO is there to defend Europe from Russia. Europe is rich enough to defend itself from Russia. It does not need the United States to do it. NATO members have nuclear weapons. NATO members can build as many tanks and can raise as big of an army as they need in order to defend themselves against. So I'm more radical than Trump on this. I believe the United States should not be in NATO, and certainly they should pay more if we are in NATO. Java says, I can say lots of negatives about Trump, but you are simply being unfair, and that is right. No, I'm not being unfair. Again, you have not shown a single fact to justify your unfairness. Now, granted, I think Trump will go down as one of the worst presidents in American history. I think what he has done to the office of the presidency, what he has done demeaning that office, and what he has done to the American spirit, and what he has done bringing into the surface so many people who are willing to do whatever he says, whatever he tells them. What he has done is he's brought out the authoritarianism in the American people. That damage, that is real damage. And for that, I despise him. And for that, I will attack him all the time and argue against him. So, he goes, Noah, right? Okay, Trump is bad on spending, which he is. And we'll talk about that when we talk about the economy. Mm-hmm. Should nuke war with North Korea? No, I've never argued for nuclear war with North Korea. There's
false alternative. False alternative.
It's a false alternative. Yeah. The false alternative is we should suck up to a dictator or wipe him out. No, you can ignore him. You could boycott him. You could embargo him. You could do nothing with him. Which is, everything was fine until Donald Trump went out to meet with him. I never took North Korea's threats too seriously. They're not suicidal. And the United States has defensive capabilities to put North Korea into its place. And I've offered many, many times, if you listen to my podcast, I've offered exactly how we should deal with North Korea, whether we went to war with them, which I don't think would have to be a nuclear war, or whether we never went to war with them. I've offered lots of alternatives to groveling. Groveling is not an alternative.
It's not American.
So even if it turns out that North Korea dismantles its nuclear weapons, I will still believe that what Donald Trump did was wrong and bad for America and an awful, awful, awful precedent for the American foreign policy.
Yes, definitely. So could we get on your economy thing? Because I don't want to run out of time.
Yeah, let's do that.
I want to know what you think of Trump taking credit for the good.
Okay, I'll just do this. How has he demeaned the American spirit? Slept with porn stars? Yeah, that's part of it. The difference between him and JFK is JFK tried to hide it. Donald Trump doesn't give a shit about it. He wants you to know about it. He'd actually boast about it. His language, the way he's talked, but everything he does is anti-American in the sense of diminishing the American spirit. The very fact that during the campaign he said I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and still get elected is demeaning to America and Americans, and the fact that he's right is what really is scary. But the fact that he legitimized that attitude, I can do anything and you will love me. That is sickening. But I'm not going to list them all now because I've spent the last 2 years listing all the ways in which Donald Trump is a disaster for the United States.
All caps tweets without any substance to make a certain point. He does
number of times. Trade is a zero-sum game, or actually claiming trade is a negative-sum game, and claiming that we're losing to Canada or losing to China, which shows not only ignorance of economics, but shows a disrespect for the American spirit, which is a spirit of individualism, which is a spirit of which, if I want to buy something for China, why is it any of your business? If I want to buy Canadian goods, why is it any of your business? He thinks that the more we trade, we lose. And let me just address this one issue, because somebody wrote, he's for zero tariffs. You do your research. No, you do your research. He has said he's for zero tariffs 2 or 3 times now. He doesn't mean it. That's where he's not hyperbole. What is it?
Hyperbole.
That's hyperbole. Because he knows the Europeans will never accept zero tariffs. He knows the US will never accept zero tariffs. He knows that the US is never going to do away with its farm subsidies. He knows that. He doesn't believe in zero tariffs.
And you know why? Because that would mean government and the bureaucrats and everybody else, all the poll peddlers, giving up their power. We're not going to have time to get to it, but I've got a story in the program notes, and it's just on that point of how much government under any administration. This is not just Trump. This is not about bashing Trump, but it talks about at the prayer breakfast, the national prayer breakfast, that they sell access to the president. And I guess they've always done this. It's not any different under Trump. But the point is, they're never going to go to zero tariffs because that is one way in which Trump and anybody else before him or after him can benefit the cronies. Our focus has got to be on getting that kind of power out of government hand.
Noah says he's in favor of intervention in genocides, which is most U.S. wars. I'm not in favor of intervention in genocides, but we're not going to get into that. There is no way in hell that Donald Trump is serious about the zero tariffs, zero subsidies attitude. This is, what's his name, whispering in his ear, his economic advisor. And I know his other economic advisors that influence his whole tariff beliefs. And again, tariffs are taxes. Donald Trump has raised taxes on the U.S. economy, and we will see that reflected in GDP numbers in the future. They weren't reflected in this quarter because the second quarter includes behavior that came beforehand. What is this? Okay. So let's talk about the economic numbers, which were quite good, 4% economic growth, which is very favorable. Peter Navarro is his economic advisor. I know Peter Navarro. I've met Peter Navarro. How many of you have actually talked to Peter Navarro? How many of you know who he is? An economist from UC Irvine, who was one of the first people appointed by Trump and is still there and is his main advisor on trade. Peter Navarro does not believe in zero tariffs. Peter Navarro does not believe in free trade. Peter Navarro does not believe in zero subsidies. Read Peter Navarro. Go back 10 years and read 10 years, I don't know if they were 5, 6 years ago, before he was associated with Trump. But the guy who's actually whispering in his ear, zero tariffs, is the other one, the CNBC economist who he hired recently. He's probably saying, if you say this, it'll appeal to the libertarians and to the economic conservatives. And he says it because he doesn't care. Trump says stuff. And he doesn't care about truth. He doesn't care about whether this reflects reality. He doesn't care about it's doable. It's Lawrence Kudlow whispering that into his ear. Lawrence Kudlow, who doesn't believe in tariffs and yet is working for a man who is imposing tariffs. Lawrence Kudlow does not believe this president's strategy is about zero tariffs. It's just, but is, supporting him nonetheless. For power, I guess.
Well, and it's not even about tariffs in the cause of security. And my evidence for that was that the White House put pressure on Congress and Congress relented to lift sanctions on that Chinese ZTE company, which they had done things that interfered with our security related sanctions of Iran, I believe, and maybe also North Korea.
No, there's no indication that any of this has to do with security. The fact that they want to impose tariffs on automobiles for national security reasons is one of the most laughable, ridiculous things I've ever heard. I think Trump is an evasive, unthinking, and evasion in objectivism is evil. I think Trump is evil. I think a lot of U.S. presidents are evil. So yes, I do think he's evil. For those of you on the chat, but look, 4% economic growth is good. Cutting corporate taxes has a positive impact on the economy. I've always said it would have a positive impact on the economy. Reducing the burden of regulation, which is definitely happening. If you listen to my interview with Paul Beard from the Pacific, who was with the Pacific Legal Foundation, the lawyer, he was talking about all the good judges that are being appointed, but he's also talking about all the fact that environmental regulations are being, the real changes in environmental regulations. Now, at the administrative level, not at the legislative level, which means they can all be reversed pretty easily. But there are real changes in the regulatory environment that is encouraging business to invest and business to grow and to create economic activities. There's no doubt in my mind that the 4% economic growth is real Not in the sense that GDP numbers are crap, but in the sense that there's real economic growth out there. Unemployment numbers are good. They're very low. The economy is doing relatively well and has done in this last quarter relatively well. And again, those are driven by two primary factors. The one factor is corporate tax decreases, which are substantial, significant, and a good thing. They didn't go far enough, but nobody goes far enough for me. So I'll give them credit for Congress and for Trump for doing that. And the deregulation, which I give credit to a lot of the people that Trump appointed to the regulatory agencies that have actually freed up businessmen and therefore freed up the economy, and therefore you're seeing increased economic growth. I don't think it's sustainable, and I'll give you two reasons why it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable, one, because of government spending. Government spending is out of control. It is worse than under Obama. It is the worst government. It reminds me of the Bush years where government spending basically tripled. So government spending is out of control, and therefore deficit spending. So you want to worry about a deficit? Worry about the United States fiscal deficit, the fact that we spend more than we bring in, right? That is a real problem. Now, the problem is the spending, not the bringing in of tax revenue. The problem is the spending. But that is a real deficit to worry about. Trade deficits don't matter. Zero matter. Somebody asked me a question, so this is a good opportunity to answer it. Whether in the trade deficit numbers, they count the exportation of stocks and bonds when like the Chinese buy stocks and bonds. And the answer is no. That is called the capital account a surplus or deficit. And we have a massive capital account surplus, about the same as the trade deficit, because they're mirror images of one another. This is what I've said all along. The trade deficit matters nothing, zero. It has no economic significance. So for every dollar that goes to China, the Chinese buy our debt. So the dollar comes back to the United States. So it's reflected in the capital surplus. Indeed, the reason we have a trade deficit is because the Chinese want dollars. And because they want dollars, they sell us stuff to get dollars so that they can invest in America, because America is a good place to invest. So the reason we have a trade deficit is because they want dollars. Now, this is why tariffs don't even work to reduce a trade deficit, because the Chinese still want dollars. So what do they do to get the dollars? Because they're not selling us as much stuff. So what do they do to get the dollars? They go on the open market and they buy dollars. What happens when they buy dollars? The value of the dollar goes up, which means the dollar can buy more Chinese stuff. So if you raise tariffs by 25% and the value of the dollar goes up by 25%, the cost, the price of Chinese goods stays the same in dollar terms.
So relatively speaking, it's low again.
Yes. So the trade deficit is not going to go down necessarily because of tariffs. If the value of the dollar goes up, guess what's been happening recently with the value of the dollar? It's been going up, which is mitigating the impact of the tariffs. It's still we as Americans are paying a tax because
it's inflation.
It could be even lower, but the whole thing is it's economists understand all this. They know all this and they predicted all this, but there are no economists in the White House, and our president has zero understanding of economics. So anyway, so the numbers are good. So the first thing is we're spending so much money that has to have economic consequences. While we're not sucking as much money out of the economy through taxes, we're sucking huge amounts of money out of the economy through debt issuance. That is through borrowing. The federal government is borrowing at huge rates. We haven't seen these rates since the stimulus package that Obama passed in 2009. So it's as bad as that. So that's one. The other aspect, the other thing that is going to depress economic growth are these tariffs, because while the tariffs might not have an impact on how much we buy from overseas because of what I just explained vis-a-vis the value of the dollar, and somebody's going to say I'm just an emotionalist because I give no facts, right? Is the uncertainty the tariffs create. So one thing that business really needs and wants and requires, and one of the reasons business didn't recover under Obama is because of the uncertainty of the regulatory regime under Obama. And now it's the uncertainty about costs of goods, costs of raw material. So if I'm a manufacturer in the United States and I import steel, what's it going to cost me? If I'm a manufacturer and I import, I don't know, something, let's say if I import chips or circuits or something from China, and I don't know what it's going to cost me. So I'm not going to invest. I'm reluctant to invest in the future. I'm reluctant to open new businesses. It's that uncertainty that is causing real problems. So I don't think you're going to see the same kind of economic growth in the future. I think Trump knows that. He's already set up his boogeyman. He's already set up to accuse the Fed of this. Now, I happen to think he might be right, that the Fed will ultimately overreact and raise interest rates too much. I do think we're going to get a recession next year. So this is my question to Trump fans. You're attributing the economic growth, the good economic times right now. By the way, if you take a plot of the economy, growth in employment, and growth in almost everything else, if you do a graph of it, and you graph it from 2009, 10 till today, through the Obama years and today, what you see is a nice straight linear line. You could argue, as the left does, and I don't think it's completely nuts to argue this, that the economy today is just a continuation of the economy under Obama. 4% growth, which we just had, we had 4 years ago, we had a quarter of 4% growth under Obama. So this is not so much better that you can't imagine this is just a continuation of the stupid Obama economy. Now, I think it is better for the reasons I stated earlier, regulations and taxes. But if you're going to give all the credit for the good economy right now to Trump, are you going to give all the credit, all the blame for the bad economy when it comes to Trump? And my guess is no. When the bad economy comes, it'll be the Fed's fault, and it'll be Congress's fault, and it'll be the leftists in Silicon Valley's fault, and it'll be markets' fault. I won't be surprised if some people actually blame markets, those liberals.
Well, and if it's the Fed's fault, it's just because the Fed doesn't go along with Trump's efforts to evade reality, to just continue the borrowing spree and keep the economy pumped up that way.
Will to some extent be the Fed's fault. So there will be some objective evidence that it will be the Fed's fault, because I'm predicting the Fed will raise interest rates too high, which is not a hard prediction because that's what they do every time in history. So there will be some element of the Fed, but I also think it'll be Trump tariffs. I think it'll be Trump's chewing out a businessman. I think it'll be his threats against people like
Pfizer and stuff,
Davidson, and threats like that. So I think it's a combination of Trump and the Fed, which is going to bring about the recession when it happens. And when it happens, my guess is that nobody who now claims that Trump is this genius will blame Trump. And I think.
By the way, just to throw an extra thing and another piece of actual evidence in there, you know that Trump just reversed on Obamacare. One of the ways that they were going to kind of chip away at Obamacare, the whole idea of repealing Obamacare is gone.
Yeah.
But one of the things that they had done is that they had refused to make payments to insurers for like reimbursement for taking on high risk people. And they have reversed themselves. So now Trump says, oh, just kidding. I'll go ahead and continue to prop up Obamacare in this way. And that sort of uncertainty too, right? About is there going to be a dismantling of this or not?
Well, I mean, remember, this is probably, they will tell me hyperbole or hyperbole or whatever, hyperbole. But don't you remember Trump saying how much he admired the Australian healthcare system and how much he believed that he believed in universal coverage, and in other words, in some form of socialized medicine. But that's hyperbole as well. I'm sure he didn't mean that. He only means the thing that you want him to mean, and he doesn't mean the things you don't want him to mean.
You're supposed to take him seriously, but not literally, Yaron. Remember?
Take him seriously,
but not literally.
And it's consistent with your ideas, and not literally when it's not consistent with you. Something like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I have two just basic questions. Oh gosh, I don't think we have time to do it. Maybe we'll do it.
Let's do it quickly. Yeah.
Okay. And then, but I want to talk a tiny bit about music at the end, because I had a question for you about the stuff that I posted. One is, that you said GDP numbers are garbage, and I wanted to ask a little bit more about that. And then I've always heard that employment numbers are not that reliable either, because there's all these people who are removing themselves from the job market. I forget what they call them, but it's, jobless people who aren't counting themselves as unemployed or something.
Well, they're not looking
they're
for a job.
higher than ever.
Unemployed are only people who are looking for a job. So if you're not looking for a job but are not working, you don't count. So it's so for example, in the last month's numbers, and don't quote me exactly, but I think the economy, there was an addition of 230,000 jobs or something. It was above expectations, but the unemployment rate went up to 4%. So it went up to 3 point something. It went up, and the reason it went up is because there are lots of jobs. More people entered the job market. Instead of more people started looking for work, and that caused that number to go up. But look, I wouldn't say that either number is meaningless or garbage. They're both useful numbers. They both say something about what's going on.
Okay.
And GDP growth of 4%, given everything else, seems to suggest the economy is doing pretty well. There's clearly, there are actually more jobs available today than there are people. I think there are lots and lots of jobs going empty. There are lots of jobs that want ads. And people are finding work. So there's plenty of statistics that show that the job market is fairly robust, right? So I'll get to that question. Man, the question, they threw me off. So both numbers are true. The unemployment number taken in the right context and understanding what it's measuring, and taken in conjunction with how many people of working age are not working, gives you a good picture of the employment number. The problem with GDP is more complex. GDP basically measures consumption. And it counts all of government spending as consumption. So if the government spends more, then it looks like the economy is growing. And I'll give you a dramatic example of this. Dramatic example was World War II. In the midst of World War II, as the US economy was producing tanks and bombers and bombs and all of that, all being paid for by the government. But at the same time, while the male population was all in Europe and Asia fighting, while people were dying and the quality and standard of life in America for those left here was declining, GDP went up a lot. Yeah. It went up, I think, 1 year, 12%, because it measured government spending, and government was spending huge amounts of money on the war effort. And because GDP counts that, it looks like the economy is expanding, but it's not really expanding. It's not really expanding because what you're spending money on is the things that blow stuff up. And what's really happening is the standard of living of people is going down. And what's really important is a measure of the standard of living, a measure of what is real economic growth versus government consumption. So GDP is not a good measure of real economic growth. Again, it's a proxy in normal times outside of wars. It's an approximation of real economic growth. The better measures out there, I can't remember the name of this one measure that the Fed produces, which is a better measure. And I still think there's work to be done to come up with even better measures. What you really want to look at is a measure of production. How much stuff is being produced for the purpose of being consumed, not for the purpose of government, but for the purpose of being consumed. That I don't know that there is such a thing. But again, if you take GDP and you take other measures and you look at employment and you look at construction out there and you look at, then the economy seems to be doing well. Now, I've seen numbers that suggest that emerging markets economies have been doing tough all year and continue to do tough this now, and it seems to be getting worse in China and in other countries, and that impacts global trade, which has a huge impact on the United States. The United States is not independent of the world. Second, if you look at consumer spending, if you look at other measures that are more subtle, there seems to be some decline. So I expect U.S. economy to slow in the third and fourth quarter. I expect there to be a recession in 19, sometime in 19. I don't expect these numbers to continue, not because I'm anti-Trump, because I'm an economist. And so I've talked to other people. I think that the signs out there that the U.S. economy is going to slow, and how much it slows is hard to tell. I'm expecting a recession next year, but I wouldn't be surprised if there wasn't one. But definitely you're not going to see 4% GDP growth again this year. I have no doubt about that. And again, the tariffs are going to start hurting global trade. The uncertainty is going to start hurting global trade, and all of that is going to hurt our economy.
But maybe the 4D chess, will get rid of some of those tariffs, right? There you go.
How is so we've got another JavaScript. He keeps saying how much he hates me, but he keeps spending money. So this is good, cool. I love it when people who hate me, give me money. How is deficit more important than greenhouse problem? You both, by your own words, are prophesizing the end of time. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what greenhouse problem you're talking about. Are you talking about climate change? I just don't know what you're talking about. But deficit spending is a problem. You want me to run through the economics of why it's a problem? Why sucking money out of the private economy by issuing debt is a problem? It's a problem because you're taking money away from productive individuals and giving it to government to consume. The economy is driven by saving and investment in the private sector. It's driven by production in the private sector. The more money you suck out of the private sector and into consumption by the government sector, the slower you're making economic growth. At some point, government is going to have to pay back this debt. How is it going to do that? Through massive increases in taxes.
Inflation like Venezuela, which is ridiculous.
Inflation like Venezuela. Either way, that is incredibly destructive to the economy long term. I think the only other way the debt could be the only other way the debt could be paid back is by massive cuts in spending. But that would be terrific if that ever happened. That is the appropriate way to pay back debt. That's what the government should be doing. The more government spends, the worse the economy is. Everything else held constant. So, you can argue that I don't know what I'm talking about, but keep spending the money on asking me questions. I don't mind you arguing. Then I'm full of.
Here's the reason that we're not predicting the end of the world. We're still here talking on YouTube. And we are criticizing the president, and we're able to be supported by listeners who are clicking super chat and everything else. We're still able to do this. And this is one reason that we emphasize the issue of free speech so much. But we're going to watch that issue because this is
But counter to what some of you believe, there is such a thing as called the science of economics. And the science of economics says that trade deficits do not matter at all, and that government spending deficits do matter. Right. And, go study economics. And if you don't want to listen to me, fine. Okay, let's, do you have another question in economics, or we're moving on to this final topic that you wanted to cover?
Yeah, no, it's just because we're over time now. Was it or was it not you who recommended this band called The Kills?
The Killers.
Oh, The Killers is the one. Okay. So someone had recommended The Kills, so it was somebody else. So my question is moot.
Yes, I didn't recommend The Kills, and I only mildly recommended The Killers. I've never recommended The Killers publicly.
Sorry.
Yeah. I enjoyed it.
Maybe just to me, because that maybe I would like it. Yeah.
But I'm not overly so. I mean, then,
Somebody had recommended The Kills to me, and I was sitting in Chipotle the other day, and there was a song playing, and I do this. This is another thing. We're in the, best time to live ever. You can put your phone up and hit a little app called Shazam, and whatever song you're listening to in a restaurant, suddenly you know what it is. So that's how this one got onto
my I've never heard of The Kills. So
program notes.
Should I look?
I was sort of surprised. That's why I had to ask you, because this did not seem like your sort of taste. You have to be in a certain mood, I think. Probably not a very good.
I have very eclectic tastes, but yes, certain things are not part of my taste. So that is true. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you, Amy. We're really close to having 500 patrons. So I need, I think, 16 new patrons. So if any of you are so inclined to support the show and make it happen and make it regular, and we're upgrading a lot of what we're doing. I've upgraded my computer in San Juan, although then it's been crashing on me. So now I'm trying to figure out if the computer I bought was a lemon. So we're trying to solve that problem. I'm going to be upgrading the camera soon in San Juan. We're doing, I'm doing interview shows now every Monday. We're doing an interview show. That's exciting. We're doing Amy every Saturday where I'm available. We're doing a show with Amy. We're going to do more shows, more stuff. So if you're so inclined, if you want to support what we're doing, big things are happening.
I think it's Rachel who recommended the kills, by the way. Thank you, Rachel. Okay, good.
Somebody says it's more ethical to replace the income tax with tariffs. No, not unless you could replace the income tax with sales tax, and then that would hit everybody equally. But to penalize imports more than to penalize domestic products is immoral and wrong and bad economically. So what you want, if to replace income tax as a sales tax, but then you'd have to repeal the
16th Amendment. And I read an argument that even that would not be enough.
I think the Supreme Court today would rule the income tax constitutional, so I don't think it would be good enough. All right. Thank you, all of those who use the super chat. Really appreciate it. Even those who hate me and use the super chat. And thank you, Amy. Patreon, subscribe to my YouTube channel. We're getting very close to 12,000, and we're aggressively promoting subscriptions so that one day I can be at 100,000. That's the goal. And we will see you. I'll see you, Amy, on Saturday. We are doing next Saturday.
Next Saturday, great.
We will see the rest of you Monday. Oh, Monday's a great show. I have got Dale Stevens. Do you know Dale, Amy?
It sounds familiar, but remind me.
Dale is a neuroscientist, and we're going to talk neuroscience, but neuroscience and cognition. So he works in a psychology department. He's got a lot to say about free will, about the whole Sam Harris bullshit about there's no free will, and neuroscience proves it. We've got a bunch of stuff to talk about. What does neuroscience tell us about cognition and about concepts? And he's really an interesting guy. So I'm looking forward to it. If you know about the Stanford prison, experiments, he's got some interesting things to say about that.
Okay.
So a bunch of stuff. Dale is a really, really interesting guy, and he just got tenure at York University in psychology. So come listen Monday. It'll be Monday at 5 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Pacific time, right here, and right here on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Blog Talk Radio. All right.
See you soon. Hey, and I want to get some of those plastic bags from y'all. Okay, so
Well, they're in Costco, but yeah, we've got.
No, but we got to do like the back alley.
We'll give you some
back alley deal and stuff for the plastic bags. Okay.
Sounds good. Bye, Amy. Bye, everybody.